I know you heard from patients this morning, and I was particularly disappointed to miss their perspectives as a precursor to what I have to say. But one of the reasons I feel more passionately than ever about the kinds of issues we're talking about today and what the appropriate and important role of the research-based biopharmaceutical sector is in that work is because its importance has become much more personal to me over the last year, as I've had a close family member who ran out of effective treatment options for her cancer, and I'm hoping future patients like her have effective treatment options available to them. I know that so often the importance of these kinds of issues can be seen through a completely different lens once you see through it, that kind of a personal lens, and that is how I see it now more than ever. But with that, I do also appreciate the opportunity to get to talk to you, and I appreciate you guys wanting to think through the critically important issue, I think, a very increasingly real issue of personalized medicine or precision medicine in healthcare, and in particular how it might relate or the implications it might hold for the work of CERTS and others on the evaluation of safety and efficacy and relative efficacy and economic value of new treatments, but not only new treatments, but as you were indicating, tests and delivery system interventions. I think that's going to be a critically important issue for all of us to tackle. I think, as Sam indicated, the importance of those issues are coming at a time where concerns about cost and cost criticisms have been as high as they've been in a while, I think, and I think we do need to get to solutions, and I think those are going to center on value, and again, I think that goes right back to the work of the CERTS, and how do we think about solutions that are going to support continued progress through fields like genomics and proteomics and precision medicine, and frankly, the health information technology that will enable it as well, while at the same time ensuring we are doing so in a system that will be affordable and sustainable and efficient over the long term. So I don't have all the answers to that, but I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to think through maybe a few questions that may be particularly pertinent to your work in the coming years. I'm going to try to move fairly quickly through a couple of basic points. One, just to briefly provide a little bit of data on our sector's role in advancing the field of personalized medicine. What is it we're doing? What is our commitment to this space? Look briefly at the opportunity that I think precision medicine holds for better patient care and more efficient health care delivery, but hopefully get to, at the end, what I think some of the particularly salient questions are related to value and evidence of value and how we generate that, how we apply it, and how we align incentives around that at the end of the day. That I think will be particularly relevant, I hope. I think probably everyone here is familiar with what personalized medicine is. For most of our work day in and day out, it relates to identification and understanding of variation at the genomic or molecular level and how that influences treatment response for particular medicines. I think if you're a practicing physician, I certainly am not that, but maybe some of you are, it can be a lot broader than that in terms of identifying risk, helping to inform prognosis, helping to inform decisions upstream around prediction and prevention and not just treatment response. Again, I don't think it is a surprise to anyone in this room that oncology is at the leading edge of personalized medicine, but there's a lot happening outside the world of oncology in terms of personalized medicine as well. This is data from IMS Health Institute that indicated that over the last 10 years, or at least up through 2013, there's been a fourfold increase in targeted therapies in the cancer space. And I think we saw that bearing fruit last year at the Food and Drug Administration as well with, I think it was a record number of FDA approvals of novel drugs that qualify as targeted therapies, are personalized, are precision medicines, and those, again, weren't just for cancer, but were for cystic fibrosis, schizophrenia, targeted subgroups of patients with high cholesterol, hepatitis C, asthma, etc. The other thing that might be worth noting is that that's obviously one way of characterizing the extent to which the investment in precision medicine is beginning to bear fruit. But it's not just through novel treatments, I think, as you probably all know, but also through new indications or new personalized indications for existing treatments. And we saw some of those last year as well. Probably Newell could speak more clearly than I could to the Keytruda approval and the indication that received for linking it to a particular molecular subtype. The other thing I did want to note briefly was that our sector is one that is heavily invested in this space. One of the reasons I maybe should let go of this slide, I don't know, but I haven't let go of it yet, is 10 years ago when we were first talking about we should have a coalition to really advance the field, and that ultimately became the Personalized Medicine Coalition. Is one of the reasons was we were hearing over and over and over again our sector is opposed to precision medicine. Our blockbuster model can't adapt to where the science is headed, and we are slowing the science down. And to Sam's point, we felt like we needed to better communicate and put in real terms our commitment to personalized medicine, not only at the scientific level, first and foremost at the scientific level, but at the regulatory and the policy level as well. So one of the things that we have done is supported work through the Tufts Center for the Study of Drug Development to survey members and characterize what is the extent of their investment. These are data from that survey that was released. This was an update. The first one was in 2010. This is an update from 2015 that basically found consistent or slightly higher numbers in 2015 than we had in 2010 around the percentage of medicines in companies' pipelines that had the potential to be personalized medicines, that is, they were being evaluated in conjunction with some type of molecular, genetic, or other biomarker that would enable the targeting of that treatment. And that was overall. That was for all therapeutic categories. In cancer in particular, obviously, that's, as I said, the leading edge of this field. 73% of medicines at this point have the potential to be targeted therapies. And again, I think we're seeing that begin to play out in FDA approvals. And we also saw last year that many companies indicated that they plan to continue increasing their investment in this space. So I try not to make it a habit of being too provocative when I'm in a room full of MDs and PhDs, but to be only mildly provocative here, maybe, I think our sector had to adapt, right? And, my proposition would be that our commitment really is fundamentally bringing better treatments to patients, and that means our commitment is fundamentally science-driven. And if that is the case, then we have no choice but to adapt, or we will ultimately not be successful over the long term. So I think this is an example of how we had to adapt away from a blockbuster model to a much more targeted and in some ways a much more dynamic model in which those targeted subgroups, we have a pretty good idea that the targeted subgroups we know about at the time of approval might not be the subgroups that we know about 2 or 3 or 5 years after FDA approval. That's more challenging, but it's where the science is leading us, and we have to go there. But I wonder if the same doesn't hold true, or that same challenge isn't reflected in how we think about evaluation and research of therapeutics in some ways. And is that also facing sort of a commensurate challenge or a similar challenge in evolving away from, I'll call it the blockbuster model of health technology assessment, frankly, which is a little more static and a little more population level based on broad populations and a value perspective that is grounded in broad populations, but is where the science is headed and is where our capacity for learning about value in much more real-time and rapid ways, is that forcing the same type of adaptation on our research enterprise? We want to leave time for that, so I'll try to continue to move quickly. I think it's important to recognize there are a broad range of ways that personalized medicine and the move to personalized medicine, it's important for us to adapt because it does hold real opportunities for improving patient outcomes, improving clinical care, obviously getting the right treatment to the right patient at the right time. We can get a better outcome sooner. We can avoid more waste, which I'll get to in a minute. We can identify people who are more likely to have an adverse effect, or who are more likely to respond, or who are at risk for a recurrence and therefore should receive chemo prevention, versus patients who are at lower risk and don't need chemo prevention. And we've seen that playing out in a number of disease areas and therapeutic areas. Obviously, hematology, cancers of the blood is one clear example where, as we have learned more about the molecular basis, molecular underpinnings of that disease area, we learned more and more that it is many, many subtypes of leukemia and lymphoma, and we've learned about how we can better target treatments to those individual subtypes, and that's been one of the major reasons that 5-year survival rates are now around 70% for leukemia and lymphoma. Again, for my family member who had a rare lymphoma, they were not in that 70%, so there's still a lot of work to do. But personalized medicine is driving a lot of real progress as well. CML and the TKI inhibitors are an obvious example as well of just one disease area where we've transformed the disease, and I'll get to this in a minute, but we've also learned more about what the impact and the value of that particular treatment was several years after the introduction of that treatment, and that will accelerate and become more variable as well in an era of precision medicine, I would argue. Again, it's not just cancer. Rare diseases like cystic fibrosis, as we are able to target treatments to individuals with particular genetic variations, like Kalydeco, that we are getting substantial improvements in outcomes like lung volume function over time. I figured, what the heck, why not throw Sovaldi up there? But even hepatitis C, while it's a much broader population, I think part of the point is there isn't one size fits all on personalized medicine therapies either. These were developed in no small part because we knew more about how to target treatments to genotypes for HCV. Yes, those are much broader populations, but they ended up offering major improvements over standard of care for hepatitis C, such that we now have treatments that are targeting every basically every major genotype of the disease, and are yielding 90% cure rates in very short time periods. So while sometimes, in this case, the personalized medicine might look a little more like the blockbuster model, it's also generating substantial gains for patients, and we'll look at the economic impacts as well in just a minute. Actually, we'll look at the economic impacts right now because we got to move along. There are a number of ways where I would say that personalized medicine is an example of how we can bring science forward that not only improves patient care and clinical outcomes, but helps make our health system more efficient and more affordable over the long term. And sometimes that means, yes, we are using a newer, more expensive treatment earlier in disease state. And I think the research last week on neoantigens and their role in patients, their potential influence on when patients or how well patients will respond to immuno-oncology therapies is really interesting. It's early, but it's an indication of how sometimes it can lead to earlier treatment of more expensive therapies so that we're getting the maximal value and maximal outcome out of them. Sometimes it means we won't be using that treatment because we have a better idea that the patients won't respond. And one of the 34% potential savings in reduction in chemotherapy use is because there's a company that has developed what looks like a pretty robust algorithm. I would say one of the areas we need more evidence is making sure we have consistent clinical utility on the diagnostic setting that will be linked to the targeted therapy. But this was demonstrating that we can do a pretty good job identifying patients who are likely to not have a breast cancer recurrence and therefore don't require chemoprevention. So there are opportunities for efficiencies by avoiding giving treatments to patients who aren't going to respond or might have an adverse, or more likely to have an adverse effect. Those are important as well. The other example on there worth noting is for strokes, blood thinners. Data shows that better use of genetics can lead to better dosing of those treatments, which have a very narrow therapeutic index and can avoid a lot of downstream negative effects. So in 2014, we heard the PBMs and even a payer association or two, sorry Sam, but was predicting that the sky would fall in healthcare financing as a result of the introduction of newer, more expensive hepatitis C treatments. What we actually saw play out a year later in 2015 was that those same actors in the market had driven substantial discounts, 30, 40, 50% discounts, such that they were saying a year later that these medicines were affordable and high value to the point that we should be making sure they're available to every patient with hepatitis. So I wanted to underscore, I guess, there the point that we have opportunities through advances like personalized medicine to get to better patient care and to make healthcare more affordable and sustainable over the long term. And I think the solution for that is around value, and I think it's around value in ways that are personalized and value that is driven in a private market-driven system. So there's a lot of policymaker interest in precision medicine. I think your work is coming at a very interesting time. I think the most salient quote on that slide for this group is probably ASCO's, because it talks really about how clinical value, their vision of how clinical value will be delivered by physicians in an era of precision medicine, which increasingly will be precise, not just regarding therapy selection, but also with respect to risk assessment, establishing prognosis, monitoring treatment effect, and predicting its tolerability for each individual. Sounds like that sounds a lot to me like the clinical version of the search job description in some way. So I thought that sort of underscored the implications of precision medicines for groups like CERTS. I think that the value and opportunity in precision medicine not only is recognized by inside the Beltway types, but by the public at large, who see the potential for this kind of advance to help make healthcare better for them, but in ways that are affordable. I would say when you talk to the public about it, it's very important for them to understand its tools that help them and their doctors make optimal decisions for them as individuals. It isn't going to be a new tool to define subgroups in a way that take choice away from them. They flip on the perceived value very quickly when you do that. I think you all are familiar with this, and I described some of the ways that we are identifying many more genes and genetic variations that influence treatment response. And while we are doing this at a scientific level, I think the policy has not yet caught up. And I think just one example of that is, while you can see on this slide just the growing range of genetic variants in certain cancer types, none of these are captured in some of the emerging payment models like the oncology care model that CMMI has developed. I think they recognize that those need to evolve so that they can, and I think one of their goals is to encourage a move to more robust data capture from providers within those models so that we can build this in to those incentives, but we aren't there yet. Some of the key areas that might be, again, most pertinent when you think about the evaluation and research of therapeutics that really come right to the fore when you are thinking about how are we supporting personalized medicine and how are we supporting value in a value-driven healthcare system. And I think that in my mind comes down to how do we generate evidence? How is that changing? How can that continue to change? How are we applying that evidence? And again, how is that going to change and continue to change in an era of personalized and precision medicine? And I'm guessing maybe if patients spoke, they spoke to the relationship between that and patient-centeredness and informed patient decision-making. And ultimately, as I was referring to with the oncology care model at CMMI, how do we build that into incentives for value-driven care that reflect the value of precision medicine, but reflect also how that value is captured when it is more dynamic and more individualized than in the past.